خير الأمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. يصلون على النبي. يا
Actually, you're not recording it, right?
On fresh news.
No, I was telling Hussein, I was going to tell Hussein, I have a feeling today's going to be a very light turnout because of the weather, the cold, and the snow. And there's the big blizzard behind us. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرض إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين ورحمة الله على محبيهم ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك في كتابه الحكيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. صلوات الله. Respected mu'mineen and mu'minat, assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullah. I begin by reminding myself and the believers to observe the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ittaqullah, ittaqur rabbukum, to be conscious, to be weary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our dealings, in all of our affairs. Ittaqullah, ittaqur rabbukum. Last week we started the discussion on leadership and the responsibilities or the rights of the leader, the hukukul rais, or the hukuk of the leader, or the one who is in charge of the community, who's in charge of the family, who's in charge of anything, whether it's the country, the family, the ummah, the role of leadership. We just introduced last week the importance of having a leader, and the Prophet had said that even if two people go somewhere, one should be selected as the leader of the two of them. And so we see that any community, one of the first things that they did whenever a new country started, whenever a new city started, whenever a new village started, was they established leadership. And if you look at the whole concept and the philosophy of foundations of leadership, you find that it's not just applicable, even last week when I gave the example of having a city or a country or a province to have the riyasat or the leadership there, but this also applies if you, for example, go on a ship. You've got the captain of the ship or the admiral of the ship, and he is in charge. He will make the final decision. If you look at an airplane, for example, the pilot is in charge of the plane. And, interestingly enough, the pilot has a number of interesting rights or abilities that normally people would not have and do not think about. For example, a pilot can marry a couple on the plane. If somebody wants to get married and nobody else is there to solemnize the marriage, the pilot can actually do that. He has the power, as does the admiral or the captain of a ship. The pilot of a ship, of an airplane, can decide who is allowed on the plane or not. So the pilot can actually refuse somebody entry onto the airplane if the pilot wishes so. I mean, he has that power. Oftentimes this is only exercised when, for example, there is somebody is drunk, or somebody is maybe high on drugs or something. In those cases, the pilot can actually say that this person will not be allowed on. Or if somebody is intimidating, if somebody is threatening, if somebody is aggressive, the pilot has that power. So in order for us to understand, with power also, of course, responsibility. But what we're saying is that the establishment of power is already there. The establishment of power is something that's necessary. So whether you're on a ship, an airplane, in a community, in a city, in a province, in a country, in a mulukiyat, in a kingdom, you know that there's one person in charge. And interestingly enough, I was debating one of these things with a polytheist. with a mushrik, and he was, adamant that, what's the problem if there is, one God responsible for the lightning, one God responsible for the cold, one God responsible for the heat, one God responsible. What's the problem with that? You can have lots of gods. Why do you have why this la ilaha illallah? Why only one God? And my response, just at that moment, because the arguments become very interestingly in the sense that they look favorable. They look, nice. That, why? How does one God handle everything? How can one God look after the whole universe? Namumkin, hai na? It becomes, difficult to, the reason why it's difficult for us to ascertain is because we have difficulty multitasking. We have difficulty multitasking and doing 3-4 things at a time. And if you look at, for example, if you are busy with a certain aspect of your work in a given week, and I ask you the following, well, did you do this for me? Baba, I only have, 24 hours in a day. I can only do this, I can only do that. So we are limited. We have only 24 hours in a day. We have only 8 working hours in a day. Now, what insan has often done is they've applied their limitations to God. They've applied their disabilities, if you want to call it that, or abilities onto God. And it was interesting because I was at an interfaith meeting just yesterday morning, before this time. I was at an interfaith meeting, and one of the speakers, one of the religious leaders there, was saying that yes, and God made man in his image. And so if you look at any cartoons or drawings of God, you see God as a human being, as a jolly old man with a nice beard. God is always a man. See, this is where we in Islam differ significantly. And his point was, this gentleman from the LDS church, his point was, even women are created in the image of God. So I was saying, I was joking with him. I said, well, is God a man or male or female? Is man or woman? You confuse me. He said, no, I'm not talking about that. He says, God has 2 hands, 2 feet, a face, 2 eyes, 2 ears, a mouth. God is like that because God created insan, the human being, in his image. So when God created man in his image, according to some of the churches, then whatever limitations of man has got, God also has got. Whatever abilities God has got, man has got. Whatever abilities or challenges or obstacles man or insan has got, God will also have to have. So Islam basically bypassed all of that and said, no, we do not subscribe to this. Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum la ta'khuduhu sinatun wala. He doesn't sleep. Not even for a moment. I need to sleep. You need to sleep. If I don't sleep for one day, I'll be so cranky, you will not be able to tolerate me for namaz-e-Jummah. Mere piche koi namaz padega hi nahi. Because it'll be intolerable, I'll be cranky. And that is why one of the punishments they used to use, I don't want to say any bad words, but these, Americans and Saddamis and the Shahs, Savak and others used to use was what? It's called sleep deprivation. The minute somebody goes to sleep, you wake them up through a shock or through light or through, noise or very cold or very hot, and you cause sleep deprivation because man needs sleep. So by us applying that, this is why they say that, God created the world in 6 days and on the 7th day he rested. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, does not need rest. But when we look at this is what the reasoning. So, there is a limitation. Whereas when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he looks after the entire universe without even a dot of sleep or even the concept of sleep or rest. Allah ta'ala is able to look after and do everything. And so the ultimate responsibility or authority comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's returned back to Allah ta'ala. So what we were saying is that we have limitations. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no limitations. We have, what we can do within a certain time frame period. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond and above that. Now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoints somebody to rule after or look after the community affairs, then we are basically bound by that. Now, there's 2 kinds of leadership here. One is the divinely appointed direct leadership, which is the Anbiya, the Awsiya, the Awliya, the Imam, the Aimma. Basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a prophet. Inna awhayna ilayka kama awhayna ila Nuhin wa nabiyyina min ba'di. We have revealed to you as we have revealed to Noah and the prophets who came after him. And then the ayah, talks about the risalat. رُسُلًا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, the prophets who brought good news and the prophets who warned. So leadership means that you warn and you give good news as well. And then what, after this divinely appointed leadership, then you've got worldly leadership. Now, today, of course, the Imam is in occultation. We are still living in the Risalat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so we are still living in the Risalat of the Holy Prophet and the Imamat of Imam Sahibul Amr. Now, the Imam has not directly come and appointed. Now, I don't want to get into this discussion of Wilayat al-Faqih, the definition of Marja'iyat. It may come up in our discussions, and I'm going to just see the Risala. I'll see the Risalat al-Hukuk and see how this will, inshallah, come into our discussion. But basically, leadership now is not divinely appointed. It has to be selected from amongst the community members. Okay? So you look at the political leadership. Here now, what is the definition, or what determines who will be a good leader and who will not? This is where the criteria of the Ahlul Bayt became very evident. That the community has to look at somebody who has not got popularity but the ability to do what is right. You know, Abraham Lincoln gave a definition of democracy. It's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So to serve the people. And Lincoln's whole foundation or idea of democracy was based on that. But in this equation of a government of the people, for the people, to serve the people, neglects a very important concept and a very important foundation. That is God, Allah, the Creator. If I was to give an example, that if today, let's say I was the leader of the community here, I presented a motion here. I said, okay, you're the people, you elected me. You haven't elected me, you are forced to bear with me. But I decide that you've elected me as your leader. Now, today we'll say that, okay, let's make alcohol halal. Let's raise a show of hands. Of course, inshallah, all of you will not do that. But if I was in another group of people and they really wanted to drink, they'll all put their hands up. Yes, let's make alcohol halal. What happens? Alcohol becomes halal. You have forgotten the divine dictates. Or if I say that, there's this bacon and pig meat, I'm enjoying it, and this is something we need to make halal because pigs are very clean nowadays. These are the arguments people give. Pigs are very clean nowadays. Let's vote to be able to eat bacon from tomorrow. Let's take a show of hands. Everybody puts their hand up. What happens? The people have agreed. The leader has presented it, but this is against the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the value of a decision has to be based on the accepted laws of the Creator. So you've got the Creator's laws, in our case the Quran Majid, the teachings of Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt. Now we have to go and be bound by those. So whoever is elected or selected as the leader is bound by the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever the Rasul and the Ali Rasul, the Ahlul Bayt Rasul, the interpreters of the Quran did in their lives or refrained from in their lives. And that amounts to what is leadership. Now the Quran Majid talks about a couple of leaders that I'll just mention in very brief, inshallah. One of the most recognized leaders was, now there's a little bit of a discussion here because of course in the commentaries of the Quran Majid, you've got a number of thoughts, viewpoints and concerns as well as interpretations. So one of the great leaders is referred to as Dhul Qarnayn, and some have referred to Dhul Qarnayn as Alexander the Great. And there's a lot of narrations about Alexander the Great, but I don't want to get into that now because of the time is for Juma. But I'll just talk about one thing that the Quran Majid talks about. Alexander, Hazrat Dhul Qarnayn, was in the eastern part of Asia. Now, some have said it's what today is China. Some have said it was actually west of China, whatever the case may be. But it was in that region. And there was a group of people, there was a community who was living there who were very rich. There were very rich people living there. But the problem was they were a bit short upstairs. So they could not understand anything. Now, one group of commentators said that they were just a backwards Jahil civilization, just like in pre-Islamic. But you see, there's a difference in pre-Islamic Arabia. In pre-Islamic Arabia, the people were smart, but in an evil way. You understand what I'm saying? They were smart, but in an evil way. They used their smartness to loot the people, to suck the people, to bother the people. Whereas in the time, in the community of Hazrat Zulkarnain or Alexander the Great, they were not very literate. So one group of commentators actually in the Shara mentions that this could have been people who were maybe mentally challenged. I don't like to call them mentally retarded, but just mentally challenged. That's the politically correct term to use nowadays. Okay, so they could. But this has been rejected by a majority of the people. A majority of the commentators have said that they just didn't want to bother with it. They were wealthy, they were rich, they had lots of money, so they didn't care about language, they didn't care about understanding each other. But there was one serious problem they had. And the problem was that they had these enemies, this group of enemies, who were very severe. Severe in the sense that they were very destructive enemies. And this has been narrated as Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog. And this community, when they saw the power, they saw the leadership, and they saw the abilities of Hazrat Zulkarnain, they asked him, they says, look, can you help us against these people, this couple, not a couple as a male, a couple as these two guys, who are very destructive. They just come every so often, they destroy things, and then they go away, and then come back after a little while, they destroy things, they go back. So can you help us? We will pay you anything. They had money, right? Maldarte, they were rich. Okay, so they'll say, we'll pay you anything. So Zulkarnain actually said, no, I don't want any money from you. I will help protect you. And so what the Quran Majid narrates in Surah Kahf is that the people said, oh, Zulkarnain, help us. And, look at. So what Zulkarnain did was he built a barrier. And actually now this is a group of commentators that I've read. So I'm not saying if it's authentic or accurate or not. But a group of commentators have actually said that this could be the Great Wall of China, where he built this barrier between them on the Gog and Magog, Yajuj and Majuj, and these people who he had gone where there was a mountainous area, there was valleys there, so the Yajuj and Majuj, Gog and Magog used to come and attack them from there. So it could be that, it could not be. So they were basically put in a barrier. They were put inside a barrier. And Hazrat Zulkarnain then basically made it very big, very long, and enclosed it. And thereafter, these two never bothered the people in the time of Hazrat Zulkarnain. So what Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib says, he says, this is an example of good leadership, of a leader who is good. He protected his people, he protected the people, he was looking after their interests, he cared about them genuinely. And this is where we find that, leadership, and I just touched upon it last week, and then I didn't get a chance to go on it, but as I mentioned, this may take more than two Jumas, definitely more than 2 Jumas. So I'm targeting, inshallah, maybe 4, but inshallah, we'll see how things progress, inshallah. So what we find is that, and Imam Ali also has been quoted as saying, a good leader will do good to the people, a bad leader will have bad results. So a good leader's rule will actually be prolonged. An evil leader's rule will be shortened. And you see, if you look at through history, and you will see, very clear examples of this. The minute, the Islamic world or the Muslim world became a hereditary kingdom, within 90 years it was finished. The Banu Abbas, 116 years or whatever, and they were eradicated as well. And so what we find is that the Imam says that a good leader will have that, and when you have a good leader, it is your obligation to obey him, to follow him, to give nasiha, advice whenever needed, as we had mentioned last week, but to follow him. And so when we look at even another example that the Quran Majid gives from Surah Al-Yusuf, you see how Hazrat Yusuf was eventually the leader of the rations, the leader, he became the prime minister, the wazir, and then eventually the aziz, and he became very, very powerful. Despite having that power, despite being so influential, he never abused the power. And this is where we get examples from the Quran Majid, whereby we are told that don't abuse the power, because he was responsible for anything and everything. If you compare that in the early part of the Khilafat of the third Khalifa, you see the difference between that. That it's one thing if somebody is my friend or my family member or somebody I like or somebody who likes me and I give them extra money, extra rations, extra this, extra that. And it's one thing to be equal. Because when his own brothers came, he gave them the same haqq that belonged to them, that belonged to everybody else. Not extra, Not that these are my brothers, my father, I have to give him more, I have to do this, I have to do that. No, no, no. Everybody got the same. And that is why we get an example in the life of Amirul Mu'mineen as well, when his own brother, Aqil ibn Abu Talib, comes to him. And they're talking about official matters. As soon as the conversation becomes personal, so how's it going, how's everything? Imam Ali rushes to the candle and he puts the candle out and he lights another candle, a different candle. So Aqil says, Baijan, brother, what's this? Why this? He says, this was the Baytul Mal candle. This was the public treasury candle. That has certain responsibilities and obligations when we were talking about official state matters. This is what I was. Now you're asking me personal issues and how I am and how are you and how's the family? I'm paraphrasing. He says, then this is my personal candle. This is the one that will be used. Can you imagine if the leaders today were to observe the example of Amirul Mu'mineen? Where we would be today? Can you imagine if the leaders of the world today realize that there is something known as Baytul Mal, and every penny, every dinar, every dirham, every dot, every euro, every pound is accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the rest, whether it's personal, is, we can do whatever we want with it. Of course, there are limitations there also. Halalul hisab, haramul hukum. But what we're saying is that the public treasury, one of the most important responsibilities of a leader is to guard the public treasury and to ensure that the decisions that they make and whatever they do is for the benefit and the betterment of the community, their population, not for themselves. And one of the biggest challenges we find of destruction in the world today, and we can look at the leaders of many of the countries that many of the Mu'mineen are from, including when I was from in Africa. And you see that in Africa, democracy may not work. Democracy, electing a leader that majority will agree to, will create thorough divisions. So you may need somebody who has got power, but not abused or abusive power. What do other leaders do? They're worried about filling, and I mentioned this last week, they're worried about filling their own pockets. They don't care about the communities. Many of the leaders from the countries that many of you are from and that I am from, the leaders were there to sort of keep their own pension plans in check, buy their houses in Europe and in Asia and in Vancouver and in different places. They build their treasures and build their empires and build their estates. And then when they go, they say Khudafis to their people and go to their resorts or to their islands. Somebody who genuinely cares about their people will stay with their people, will die with their people, and care about them enough that whatever decisions and transactions are made are for their benefit, not for his or her benefit. And then you will have a leadership based on taqwa. That is the aim of the Ahlul Bayt's teachings. And of course, the aim of the Quran Majid. Numerous examples, like I said, Hazrat Yusuf, Hazrat Zulqarnain are just two very brief examples that the Quran Majid talks about, whereby leadership played an important role. Leadership was able to, do what was betterment for the community, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shaniyaka huwa al-abtar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرض إلها واحدا أحدا صمدا لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين طه وياسين بالقاسم محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وصل على وسير رسول رب العالمين وأمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين وقاتل الكافرين والمشركين مولانا علي بن أبي طالب وصل على بنت رسول رب العالمين سيدة نساء العالمين صديقة الطاهرة أم الأئمة فاطمة الزهراء وسلم على سبت نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة إمام الحسن والحسين صلى على محمد والأئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين سيد العابدين ومحمد ومحمد بن علي الباقر من النبيين محمد وجعفر بن محمد الصادق البار الأمين وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا المرتضى ومحمد بن علي التقي الجواد وعلي بن محمد النقي الحادي والحسن بن علي الزكي العسكري والإمام القائم الحادي المهدي المنتظر اللهم عجل فرجه وقرب زمانه وكثر انصاره واحلك عداه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك حجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا معينا حتى تسكنوا أرضك طوعا وتمتع فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك في كتابه الحكيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. Once again I remind myself and the believers to observe the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. اتقوا الله اتقوا ربكم. And with the Olympics underway, the community has been discussing a lot of things, and I've had a number of the youngsters yesterday and different occasions talk and say, well, of course, one of the things that we find is that Islam has always encouraged the physical strength, if you want to call it that, the physical upkeep of the individual. And last week, I appreciated many of the women who came in and spoke to me about my khutbah there, about self-defense, about making sure we're protected, making sure we protect ourselves, our families, our community, and each other. And it seemed that perhaps I might have come out a bit harsh in that second khutbah. However, I do wish to clarify, and I thank the Mu'mineen for bringing that to my attention. Sometimes I may not appreciate what or how the message is being conveyed. By no means did I ever say or have I ever encouraged aggressiveness. I have constantly spoken about defensiveness. So if we get attacked, we have every right to defend ourselves and to protect ourselves, our families. Just like if a thief walks into breaks into our house, if somebody wants to hurt the community, breaks into the Husainiyah or the masjid or the Imam Bargaz or anywhere else, we have an obligation to defend and protect ourselves. The only way we can do that is if we ourselves are strong, if we ourselves are able to do that. And this is why I was saying that one of the things that we need to, as a midterm plan, not even a long-term plan, as a midterm plan, is having our children and even our spouses. And I mentioned this last week about, the various emails that have come to me or messages. Should our ladies be educated in martial arts or in defensive tactics? And I definitely believe so. And one of the things that also has to be, clarified very clearly is that any type of, and of course we're not allowed to carry dangerous weapons, firearms. This is Canada, so we're not, Canadians don't do things like that. But at the same time, if we have, pepper spray or other things, make sure that these are not things that will be used against us. If we, we have something in our pocket, we have to ensure that we are strong enough to be able to retain authority and control over that instead of letting that be used by an enemy who wants to harm us or our families. And so one of the things I want to again emphasize is the defensive tactic. It is a defensive khutbah that I've been talking about. It is not something that I've ever condoned aggressiveness. You don't go and attack somebody. You don't go and think that somebody, of course, comics are full of the sometimes American mentality, and I can see it in the current president, not in the last president, but the president before that. We had the same thing. I thought he was going to hit me, so I hit him back first. We don't subscribe to that ideology. We don't want to wait for somebody to hit us, but we want to be protected. And that's one of the things that if you look at the entire Iranian foreign minister's statements on Iran's defense abilities and missile program, this is something that becomes very clear. that when we were attacked, nobody helped us. So we have to help ourselves. And I think that applies not only to countries, but our communities as well. And these are things that sometimes are very difficult to talk about. And I'm sure that if I was to take a survey in the family, in the community here, and I know this is something, just keep this to yourself as well, like between you and your families. But if I was to take a survey right here in this Salatul Jummah, I am not sure how many of us, if even half or a quarter of us, have spoken to our families and said, what do we do if somebody breaks in? What do we do if somebody comes to steal? What do we do if an emergency arises? What is the fire plan? If there's a fire in the house, how will we get out? What will we do? You see, it's too late when it happens. And if at that time you don't know what to do and you get burned to death, what is the point of that? And so one of the things that we need to do, and Islam has told us to be prepared for various eventualities. We, alhamdulillah, are very lucky here. We have this safety in our minds and safeguarding of our minds. Our house will still be there when we leave. The worst that might happen is there's a blizzard and we might get blown here and there, or the car might skid. But it's not like Palestine or Yemen or Bahrain or in Syria, where you go home one day and you have no house. Your family has been killed. Your cars and your horses have been blown up and killed or destroyed. We, alhamdulillah, don't have that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we become oblivious to the dangers that are around us. And I think that this is something that we need to take a little more seriously. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't already, this is something that we, inshallah, encourage the mu'mineen to do and to be prepared for. And there are actually organizations, because I've also gone through various trainings on that, which, inshallah, I'm hoping that some Laylatul Jummah or some discussion we have, we can talk about this honestly and frankly. Of course, Salatul Jummah in 10 minutes is only a message we can convey. We cannot practically look at how and what needs to be done, how we do it, what do we do. Something as simple as an asa that I have, if God forbid somebody is here, how would we use this? How can we use it as opposed to him or her using it against us? And so these are things that we need to at least be talking about and just be prepared for. Inshallah, we pray and hope it never arises. But if it does, we don't want to look foolish and say, well, what, you weren't prepared for anything? You were not ready for anything? If a thief comes into our house and causes damage to our family and our friends, we don't want to be seen as foolish. You had no preparation plan? You had no emergency preparedness? And if you look at a lot of the government websites, you will find that. Emergency Preparedness Week, Emergency Preparedness Day, Emergency Preparedness da-da-da. So it's talking about everything. A fire, carbon monoxide, it's talking about, theft, destruction, anything, any of those things. And also natural disasters. Alhamdulillah, we're not so tornado or earthquake prone here, but you never know. Yes, hurricanes, you'll see we're not so far close to the ocean or any body of water, but tornado has gone through here nearby. Are we prepared? What will we do? How will we do it? What do our kids know? Of course, at school they get taught, but do all the kids tell us as parents what we should do if there was a tornado here? Where do we go? What do we do? And so this is something that, inshallah, our community needs to talk very frankly and honestly about. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and the ability to be able to do that, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد